Hello, this is Kirian and welcome to today's episode of Code with Kirian. In this video, I'm going to go over the basic setup and configuration of Visual Studio Code, and I'm also going to be sharing a couple of extensions I use that make the coding experience easier and faster. This video is meant for beginners, but if you already have some basic knowledge, you might want to stick around and pick a few important things on the way. Hit that subscribe button and let's get started. The first step in writing code is picking a code editor. There are tons of wonderful code editors like Notepad++, Brackets, Sublime Text, etc. I, however, prefer Visual Studio Code. VSCode is an open source project. It has support for a wide range of languages and has a lot of extensions created and managed by its large community. So the first step, of course, is to install VS Code. So go to code.visualstudio.com/download. This is a cross-platform project, so go ahead and download the appropriate version. Then install. I'm going to speed up the video so we don't waste time. When you get to this point, I recommend checking all these boxes to ensure that VS Code is fully integrated into your operating system and it does stuff like setting the environment variables and others. Once the installation is complete, this is what you'll see. VS Code can be used for many different programming languages, but since this tutorial is just for web development, we are going to only focus on HTML, CSS and JavaScript. So let's have a quick tour. Over here is the sidebar, and at the top is the Explorer. This is where you find all your project files when you open a new project. And this here enables you to search for characters and words within your files, and it also has a find and replace function too. These two represent the source control where you can integrate Git and the debug for testing purposes, but we won't cover that for now, maybe later. And next we have the extensions. We'll get back to that in a second. Down here we have a couple of settings: the command palette, the keyboard shortcuts, the color themes, and other settings. The command palette enables you to search for anything like theme, keyboard shortcuts, or virtually anything you want to search within VS Code. So let's check out the keyboard shortcuts. As you can see, there are many shortcuts which you can edit to your liking if you want. I'll advise you to learn as much as shortcuts as you can, as this can quicken your coding process a lot more and reduce how much you waste navigating with your mouse. Let's look at some settings. Here, you could customize your editor to suit your needs. You could increase the font size if you think this is too small or your screen is too big. You could also edit the tab size to say 2 for those who don't like the 4 tab spacing. Another important thing to turn on is word wrap. I'd like to have this turned on so long lines of code don't go off the right side of the page. Before you move over to extensions, I want to talk about one important feature of VS Code called Emmet. It is inbuilt in VS Code, so it comes in default after installation. Let's explore some basic things you can do with Emmet. We'll create an HTML file and name it emmet.html. With Emmet, we can drastically speed up the rate at which we write out HTML code. So if I type !, I get this pop-up that says Emmet abbreviation. So if I hit enter, there you have it, a basic blank HTML page. Then I can tap through these highlighted areas to edit the content there. If you're a complete beginner, you probably don't understand this much of code. Check my channel for videos on HTML and CSS to get started. Now within the body, if I want to create a H1, I'll just type H1 and again, it pops up. And I hit enter and see, it automatically creates a H1 open and close tag for me. I could just type .heading and it creates a div with a class of heading. Let's say I want to create an ordered list with 5 items, and I'll type ul greater than li times 5. It automatically creates a list skeleton for me, and I just have to fill it up. Let's say I want to create an anchor with an ID home. I'm just going to type this and it creates the anchor for me. Also, I could type p.section/content and hit enter, and it creates a paragraph of class, section, and ID's content. Inside it, you can enter some placeholder text by typing lorem and entering a random number, say 40, and it's going to generate 40 words of lorem into text. If you type input, you will see a couple of suggestions: button, checkbox, email. This is called IntelliSense. IntelliSense handles giving you suggestions as you type your code and auto-completes when you select the options. For example, when I create an input naturally and I want to set the type, it gives me a couple of suggestions that I can choose from. Great, back to the extensions. You basically have two types of extensions: those that affect the visual representation of the code and those that help you do something faster. The first one is Prettier. Prettier does exactly what the name says. It makes your code pretty. It formats your code uniformly across all your files. There is this one setting I recommend you adjust here, and that's the format on save. It's set to false at default, and you definitely want to set it to true, since you want Prettier to format your code every time you save your code. To change this, I'll just hold down the Control or the Command key and press comma to get this search box and search for format on save. There are several other settings that you could look into here in the Prettier documentation. The second one I recommend is Auto Rename. It's one of those extensions that help you do something faster. They have a demonstration here. As you can see, if you edit the opening tag, the closing tag automatically changes with it too. This is very helpful, especially for big chunks of code where the closing tag might be somewhere down and, reaching down to change it might be difficult for you. The next extension we are going to look at is Css Peak. This one allows you to pick your CSS definition from your HTML file. This is very helpful, especially when you have a large CSS file and you find it difficult sifting through the code to find a particular class. So you just have to hit the Control and hover over a class, and automatically it shows the definition of that class. And then if we click it, it will take us directly to the position of that class in the CSS script. If a class happens to have multiple definitions, it will tell you to click to show. If you click that, it will spawn a pop-up window from which you can edit the definitions without actually having to go to the CSS file itself. And this is pretty cool. It saves a lot of time for me. The next extension is the Live Sass compiler. This compiles your Sass code into CSS automatically. Now there are some settings you want to set after installing this extension. So we go to settings by holding Control and hitting comma and just type in Sass. You should see Live Compiler here. Click Edit in settings.json. We have to add some lines there. Once you begin to type, the suggestion should pop up. Set the format as compressed if you are in a production environment, as well as the extension as main.css, so it generates a minified version. However, if you are still working on the code, then it's best to set it to expanded and leave the extension name as .css, since the minified version is very difficult to read through. The save path is basically your choice. I prefer setting it as dist/css, so it outputs in a distribution folder under a CSS folder. So I'll use a little demonstration to show how this works. If you don't know what Sass is, that's okay. I'm doing something pretty simple. Sass is a CSS precompiler and gives us more power than the basic CSS. I'll dive deeper into Sass later in this channel. So here, I'll create a folder named Sass, and in that folder I'll create our sample Sass file and name it main.scss. Then I'll create a simple variable color and assign it this shade of blue, and another variable padding and give it 2rem. I'm just gonna create a class container and assign the color to the color variable. And then I'm going to next.ul there and give it a padding using the padding variable. Nesting is one of the advantages Sass gives us to make writing CSS easier. So if you hit watch Sass from down below, we see a distribution folder containing a CSS folder that houses the main.css has been automatically generated. Now if we open main.css, we found out that it's pretty much empty, and that's because we haven't saved our Sass file yet. So Ctrl S to save, and now the regular CSS equivalents have been automatically generated. The watch Sass does the job of watching our Sass files for changes, and when they spot new ones, they update the CSS equivalent. For example, let's change the color to red, and once we hit save, it has automatically updated our changes. Alright, let's move on to the last extension, which is Live Server. Live Server creates a local development server with live reload capabilities. Once you've installed that extension, you see the button below which says Go Live, and when you click it, it launches the live server. And any changes we make on the HTML page, it updates automatically without the need to refresh the page. This saves us a lot of time and helps to speed up your process. Alright, I think that's pretty much the basics of Visual Studio Code. If you loved this video, then give it a thumbs up and leave a comment below so I know how well you understood it. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button so you get notified when I post new videos. Thanks for watching. See you later.